Across China, President Xi Jinping has implemented technology in the persecution of all religions, including Falun Gong, house church Christians, Uyghur Muslims, and Tibetan Buddhists. This is no more evident than anywhere in Xinjiang, also known as East Turkestan. Under the guise of anti-terrorism, the Chinese government has implemented a vast and secretive system of internment camps in Xinjiang, where more than 1 million Uyghurs and other Turkic minorities have been detained. Initially denying their existence, Chinese officials have defended the camps as vocational training centers. At the direction of President Xi Jinping, authorities have transformed Xinjiang into a police state, weaponizing facial surveillance and CCTV cameras to monitor the activities of Uyghurs. A contract with Hikvision, a technology company, required the installation of facial recognition cameras to be placed on the entrance of each of the 967 mosques in Moyo County in Xinjiang. And this is implemented across China, including against house churches, which have implemented cameras on the front of podiums in order to monitor who was attending the church services. A system also called the Uyghur face detection can determine if an individual in an image or video has any Uyghur features. The Chinese government uses this technology to racially profile individuals and automate the qualifications for persecution. China is estimated to have almost 400 million surveillance cameras. This technology is used against anyone deemed a threat by the CCP, including other ethno-religious minority groups. Today, we will hear more about this from experts, policymakers, advocates, and the testimony of one courageous survivor. First up, I want to introduce Congressman Frank Wolf, who served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 34 years, representing the 10th District of the state of Virginia. He is the author of the International Religious Freedom Act and has recently been appointed as a USCIRF commissioner. Frank.
Oh, good. I didn't know that. Well, I didn't know that I was speaking, so I'm glad to be here. I'll just make a couple of comments. Thanks, Logan. One, I want to commend ChinaAid, because I think Bob Fu and ChinaAid has done more, quite frankly, than any other group in the country on this issue. So thank you, Bob, and thank you, Logan, and thank you, board. I see this young man with you here. He used to work in my office for a number of
I still work for you.
What's that number of years? Are you turning down the sound system? I think I am, yeah. Good. That's a good staffer, because that's what I was wondering. Is anybody going to turn down the sound system? I'll be very brief. One, China is opposing every faith group. Catholic Church, we saw what took place to Cardinal Zen last month, 90 years old. Every time Cardinal Zen would come to America, he would come by my office. He's 90 years old. And can you imagine what a prison sentence would be for Cardinal Zen? Hong Kong, I watched the transfer of Hong Kong when 25 years ago, when Patton, who's still alive in England, transferred it over. There was great hope. So now we see what's taking place. The Catholic Church is being. We've done more with regard to Protestant pastors. The number, Bob would be able to tell you, that are in jail today at this very moment and going through a very difficult time. Back in the late 90s, I slipped into Tibet. In Tibet, even then, but even much worse now, there is cultural genocide. Hundreds of Tibetan monks and nuns have poured kerosene on their bodies. Across from the Patala, where the Dalai Lama used to live, is a open field ground now with regard to jets and MiGs and things like that. Lhasa is nothing more than almost a Chinese city with little ghettos that have bulldozed those large areas. So it's cultural genocide with regard to the Tibet. And we know with regard to the Uyghurs. And I want to cover something that Logan mentioned, which is very important. Speaking for myself, when she mentioned Hikvision. But we know what's taking place, and I appreciate what Bob and Logan and others have done with regard to the Uyghurs. It is actual genocide. It is actual genocide, and we see the tremendous suffering of the Uyghurs. With regard to the Falun Gong, many of you may remember, some of you do not. Looks like a kind of a younger crowd. There's a good friend of mine, Harry Wu. Harry used to come by. You remember Scott, our office, came by and showed me pictures of people who were being executed by the Chinese government. They would literally get them out, take them out of the prisons, take their blood type, take them out, put a bayonet in their back, brace them, and then shoot them and take their kidneys out as they were waiting to go in and transfer. The Falun Gong has gone through a very, very difficult problem. If you read the Freedom House report, you can see what's taking place. And I think the kidney issue is also impacting on the Uyghur community. The last thing I want to speak, and I'm not speaking for USCIRF, what I was appointed to, I'm speaking as an individual, for myself. When Logan mentioned Hikvision, how many cameras?
967, I think. Yeah, 967. Oh, mosques.
No, but how thousands?
400 million surveillance.
400 million cameras. Hikvision has a lobby effort here in this town. A lobby effort here in this town. How can you possibly be lobbying for somebody who's been involved with regard to genocide? And I urge all of you to read the book by Peter Schweitzer. How many of you read the book? One, Bob. I know Bob, but Peter Schweitzer, called Red-Handed. No one should represent, whoever has been a congressman, senator, or congressman, or a high-level official should represent any nation that is a CPC nation, country particularly concerned. When we did the legislation, that's what they call the CP designation. And so the very fact, doesn't it break your heart that there are high-ranking former officials, congressmen, and others that are now representing him? So I welcome you. It's good to see so many young people. The church needs to be involved in this issue. We need the church to wake up, the church in the United States to wake up. And I think this is very important. I pray, and I'm going to end on this. In 1985, Congressman Chris Smith and I went to Romania. And what I saw in Romania was very, very difficult, very, very brutal. What they were doing to the Catholic Church. I remember Bishop Bella that we met with in the Protestant church, and what they were doing. I came back and I prayed for the end of the Ceausescu administration. And every night I would pray. In 1989, I remember seeing, when I was buying a TV set for my wife for Christmas time, the fall of the Ceausescu government. I jumped in an airplane and went and saw firsthand. I pray every night for the change of the Chinese government, whereby the Chinese people of all faiths, of all denominations, can live in peace and freedom. They are wonderful people, but we need to wake up the church. We all need to be active. And we also need a law or an executive order that prohibits anybody who's had a high-level position in this administration or any administration who served in Congress to represent any country that is a country of particular concern. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Congressman Wolf. No one can quite burn a fire underneath you than his words, and we're grateful for all that he's done over his career. He's been one of the best advocates that we've seen for religious freedom and for China that we've had in the Congress. Next up, we are honored to have Ovalbek Turdakun, who is also known as Joseph, here with us today. While ethnically Kyrgyz, he's originally from Xinjiang. In February 2018, he was arrested from his home in front of his wife and son and incarcerated without just cause and due process in a training center, where he remained for 10 months. He finally escaped by traveling to Turkey on a tourist visa from Kyrgyzstan, where he was located at the time. He is the first Christian detained in the camps to escape and testify publicly about his experience. Alongside his wife and son, he landed safely in the United States on April 8th, 2022, and we are so grateful for his courage in being able to share his story.
大家下午好。大家下午好，
Good afternoon, everyone.
很高兴见到你们。
It is a pleasure to meet all of you.
我是来自新疆，
I'm from Xinjiang.
我名字叫 Ovalbek Turdakun，
My name is Ovalbek Turdakun.
在新疆集中教育的受害者。
And I'm a victim of the concentration camps in Xinjiang.
我原来是一个生意人，
I used to be a businessman.
我爱人因为是我爱人是吉尔吉斯斯坦人，
And my wife is from Kyrgyzstan.
我们就开始做外贸生意。
And we began to do business
哈萨克斯坦和吉尔吉斯斯坦，
in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan
就卖家具。
to sell household items, furnitures.
后来，中央对新疆的政策的影响，我们的生意也受到了限制。
But because of policy changes in the Chinese government, our business became affected.
不能出去做生意，也不能出国。
We could no longer do business outside and we can no longer go abroad.
但是还不错，我们就老家买了一套房子。
But we were doing pretty well that we were able to buy a house in my hometown.
后来我们发现，我们老家也慢慢建每500米一个警察的岗亭。
And we later discovered every 5 meters in our hometown there were guard posts.
这是16年的年底。
And this was at the end of 2016.
后来就它速度比较加得很快，就建了很多岗亭和集中教育中心。
And they later quickly quickened the process and began to build even more guard posts.
我的老家的一个小学和中学改成集中教育中心。
And an elementary school and a middle school in my hometown was reconstructed and turned into a concentration camps.
我也受到了限制，不能做生意。
And I was also restricted and couldn't do business.
然后就开始，我发现我老家的人一天比一天被抓教育中心。
And I discovered people one by one were taken into concentration camps in my hometown.
后来时间到2018年的时候，
And in 2018,
2月10号，
in February,
早晨，政府派有些人员过来到我这家，
in the morning, the government sent officials to come and visit me at my house.
到医院去检查，然后把我送到当地的集中教育中心。
They took me for medical examination at the hospital and then sent me to the concentration camp.
这个过程就没有过任何的法律的程序，
There was no due process involved at all.
直接家里抓，直接到医院，然后到教育中心。
They arrested me at my house and then sent me to the hospital and then immediately to the concentration camp.
像我一样的就是无辜的人都是。
And all the other innocent people as well.
那个进去以后，就是周围全部都是，刚前面说了，就是海康卫视，所有的地方都是海康卫视监控。
And when I went in there, there were all Hikvision cameras all around.
里面是一个长长的过道，左右全部都是一间一间的小小的房子。
It was a long corridor, and then there were small little hut houses around.
每一间都是5、6米长。
All of them were about 5 to 6 meters long.
我在的那个地方就是23个人在一个屋子里面。
The one that I was in had 23 people in it,
那个里面也有监控器，
and there were monitoring or surveillance cameras inside as well.
也是黑科卫视。
And they were also from Hikvision.
我们睡在那个地方，生活在那个地方，卫生间也在里面。
We sleep there. We do all of our all of our daily routines there. We went to the bathroom there.
就是吃那个大锅的饭，不像电视报道那样一个人一个套餐吃，不是，是大锅饭。
Unlike what was reported on TV, we did not get individual meals. We all had our meal in one big pot.
里面就是定期的抽血检查，
And routinely, they will take our blood to do blood tests.
还有一些发药让我们吃，
And they will also give us drugs to eat.
也是有茶一样的液体，就是让我们喝。
And they would also give us liquid for us to drink.
都是他们说就是抵抗，你们增加你们抵抗力的药，你们必须喝。
And they tell us that it was mandated because it was good for our immunity.
也是定期的，就是打一种的针，就是预防针。
And also routinely would give us mandated vaccinations.
也是说这个针就是增加你的抵抗力的针。
And also told us that it would be increasing it would increase our immunity.
我在那里面待了10个多月的时间。
I was there for a little over 10 months.
我也喝了药，吃了药，打了针。
I also ate the medications, drank the medications, and got all the injections.
也就顺便到外面坐那个老河灯。
And was also sent to the tiger chairs.
老河灯是一般的，外面有老河灯，它是一般的灯，但是里面也有老河灯，它是一间房子。
There are tiger chairs outside, and there are also tiger chairs inside the rooms as well.
那个进去房子以后，就是一排一排的老河灯。
When you walk into the room inside, there are rows and rows of tiger chairs.
一个老河灯是一个小小的一间房子，就是这么小的一个房子，一个老河灯。
In a small room, there would be one tiger chair.
它墙体是软的，你怎么撞怎么看都是软的，不受伤的那种，你声音听不到的。
The walls were all soft. No matter how much you hit it, no matter how much noise you make, the outside would not know.
它是有那种特殊的东西做的。
It was made of some kind of special material.
它门关上以后，什么声音你都听不到。
Once they closed the door, none of the noises inside would be heard outside.
我们也听不到，他们外面也听不到。
We couldn't hear the outside, and the outside couldn't hear us.
没有窗户，
There were no windows,
只有一个厚厚的门。
just a really thick door.
后来就结束了这个漫长的日子。
And that ended the long days that I spent inside.
18年的12月的17号晚上，
December 17, 2018, the night,
政府就偷偷的把我从教育中心拉出来，
the government officials secretly took me out of the concentration camp
把我外面那个衣服脱下来，
and changed me out of the clothing I was in
因为每一个人都有衣服，他们统一办法的。
because everyone inside had a uniform that they all wore.
我脱下了那个衣服，
I took off that clothing,
然后他们给我发了一个空白的纸，什么都没有的空白的纸，
and they gave me a blank piece of paper. There was nothing written on there,
就上面签字、按手印，
and asked me to sign it and put my fingerprint on it.
然后我们签了很多，不是1、2张。
It wasn't just one or two, there were multiple papers that I signed.
也签了关于这个教育中心里面的事情要保密。
And also signed a confidentiality agreement that everything inside the camp had to be kept secret.
然后人睡觉的时候，晚上就送到了家。
And they sent me home the night of.
看到我叫我爱人他们在家也在填那个表，
And when I went home and I saw that my wife was also signing and fingerprinting.
然后他们填完了大概1个小时左右走了。
It was after about an hour, then they left.
第2天又过来了，
And on the second day, they came again.
我以为回家了全部结束了，
I thought that once I was home, everything would end.
但是重新开始再加软禁
But house arrest started again
8个月，
for 8 months.
我手上就是 GPS 手表，
I had to wear a GPS watch.
它是专用的钥匙，我是去不掉的。
There was a special lock on there, so I could not remove it.
他们可以看到它有电量有多少，
They could see how much battery was on there.
没有电了，他给我的爱人打电话，你要充电，这个
If there was no battery, they would call my wife and tell her that she needs to recharge it.
它是无线充电，
It's wireless charging.
他知道充好电还是没充好电，都知道一清二楚。
They would know whether it was recharged or not and how much battery was on there. They knew everything really clearly.
然后我出去就是也没有人身自由，
And when I went out, there was no personal freedom either.
出门在外每一个大门都有那个黑卫星那个摄像头，
When I went out, every corner had a Hikvision camera.
你必须经过它的下面才能出门。
You have to duck and go under it in order for it to not capture.
送孩子买东西都要从那个大门进去出去。
And that front door or front gate, every time I sent or bring my child home, I would need to pass that.
我每次送孩子或者是买生活的物品到外面出去进来，
Every time I send my kid to school or if I'm going out for grocery shopping, I need to pass that front gate.
都被当地的警察抓住，
And the officials would arrest me
因为这个人脸识别的那个系统，
because of the facial recognition system.
它输入了我的面孔，
It has my facial recognition on there.
我只要经过那个门儿，
As long as I pass that door,
不管是医院或者是什么地方，
it doesn't matter whether it was a hospital or other places,
他们都要警察过来，2分钟就抓到我。
they would come and arrest me within 2 minutes.
所以我知道它的牌子是什么牌子的摄像头。
So I know what brand those cameras were.
然后他们就让我参加那个强迫劳动，
And then they asked me to join forced labor
因为我出来身体很虚弱，走不了路，
because when I was out of the concentration camp, I was physically really weak and I couldn't even walk
都是因为教育中心里面吃的药或是长时间不见太阳的影响。
because of the medication that was given in those concentration camps, as well as not being able to be in the sun.
都是我爱人帮我扶住我走，
So my wife had to support me on the side in order for me to walk.
因为身体不好，我没有参加那个强迫劳动。
Because my body was not in good condition, so I didn't have to participate in forced labor.
所以我看病到医院去也要抓，因
So-
为医院也有那个系统。
So even when I went to the hospital for medical checkups, they would still come and arrest me because of those facial recognition cameras.
所以他们说这个教育中心结束了，但是一点都没有人身的自由。
So even though my time at the concentration camp ended, I still did not have any type of individual freedom.
后来他们让我参加政治学习，因为我们出去在外教育中心出来的人，他必须一天参加政治的学习。
And later, they asked me to participate in political studies. Everyone that leaves from the camp need to participate in political studies.
就是恐吓的时候，我们就是你们没有未来的人，你们一点都没有未来的人，
And they would threaten us and tell us that we don't have a future.
你们是对国家和党有危险的人。
You all are people that are dangerous to the party and dangerous to the state.
你们的这个过去就是教育中心的过去，会影响你的下3代人。
Your experience or your history in those concentration camps are going to affect your next generations.
我听到这个很失望。
I was very disappointed when I heard that.
我们也被无辜的抓进去了，但是我们的下3代人也是这样对待。
We were innocently captured, but they even want to continue that persecution for the generations to come.
他们政治学习的时候，就是很公开的就说你们就是这样的人。
And in those political studies, they would very outrightly tell us those things, that these are the people that you are.
听到我这个很害怕，我下3代人已经没有未来。
After hearing that, I was very scared because the generations after me to come will not have a future.
而且政府的人没有帮助我们，还有恐吓的说你们3代没有未来。
And the government did not even want to help us, but instead wanted to threaten us to tell me and tell all of us that the future generations to come will not have a future.
还有每一个家庭有3个类型，3种的家庭，
And they categorized the households into 3 types:
就是放心的家庭、
the assured households,
危险的家庭，
the dangerous households,
还有重点
and the
关注
key
的家庭。
and the key households, key concerned households.
但是他不会告诉你你属于哪一种家庭，
But they wouldn't tell you which household you belong in.
这个是很没有道理的。
And this is just absurd.
后来我们2019年了，
And in 2019,
我还在家里软禁。
I was still under house arrest.
这个 GPS 手表6个月的时候，他们过来拿钥匙去掉了。
And after 6 months, they came and took the lock off my watch, the GPS watch.
但是他们还是不让我用手机，
But they still wouldn't let me use phones
也不让我用那个交通工具，
or transportation.
开车、骑摩托车都不行。
I can't drive a car. I can't ride a motorcycle. None of that was allowed.
后来我们问了，为什么我走不了路，我必须要骑摩托车过去办事。
I couldn't really walk properly, so I had to take the motorcycle in order for me to do different things.
后来我知道他们害怕我们骑摩托车撞他们，
And after that, I found out that it was because they were afraid that we would ride the motorcycles to hit them.
是这样子的。
And that's how it was.
后来感谢上帝，我们很成功的离开中国。19年的7月29号。
And in in July 29th, 2019, thank God that we were able to leave China successfully.
因为我爱人是国外的，
Because my wife is a foreigner,
他们就主动给我护照，
they gave me a passport
你可以出去看你的国外的家人。
and said that I could leave the country to see my family abroad.
但是有一个条件，你必须30天之内回来。
But under one condition, which was that I should return back home within 30 days.
然后也签了有些合同，就是保密的合同，
And also signed confidentiality agreements.
就离开了中国。
And I was able to leave China.
到了中国，到了吉尔吉斯斯坦，是我爱人的家乡。
I arrived in Kyrgyzstan, that's where my wife is from.
因为我身体还是很虚弱，
Because my body was still really weak.
出来将近可能快1年了，但是我到吉尔吉斯斯坦来还是走路，还是300米，不会到500米，我必须要坐下来休息。
Even after a year out of the concentration camp, even in Kyrgyzstan, I was still unable to walk properly, even for about 300 to 500 meters.
所以我们在那边看病。
So I went for medical checkup.
那个时候我们也收到手机微信，就是让我们回来。
And at that time, we received WeChat messages asking us to return back to China.
就是说因为身体的原因，我在看病，所以我30天内回不了。
And I told them that I could not go back within 30 days because of how weak I was physically.
后来就疫情开始了，他们也不让我回去的这个消息。
And then the pandemic started, so I wasn't able to go back.
但是他们 换了另一个方式，就是中国驻吉尔吉斯斯坦的大使馆开始找我。
But they started to use another method, and it was through the Chinese embassy that was stationed in Kyrgyzstan.
也是不要让我申请吉尔吉斯斯坦的这个国籍。
And they did not want me to apply for Kyrgyzstan's citizenship.
也要回去到中国去，把中国的户籍消除掉。
And that I had to go back to China and remove my household registration in China.
然后可以回到吉尔吉斯。
And then I can go back to Kyrgyzstan.
这个不可能，我好不容易出来，我到中国去很危险。
That's impossible. It was so difficult for me to leave, and it's going to be difficult for me to go back.
所以没有会。
So I did not go back.
后来我的中国的银行卡被冻结了。
And after that, my Chinese bank accounts were frozen.
可以取钱，银行卡取不了钱。
And I could no longer withdraw money from those accounts.
然后我感觉到这个也很危险。
And I began to sense that this was dangerous.
后来有理由就考虑离开这个吉尔吉斯斯坦。
And this, after several reasons, we think that it was best for us to leave Kyrgyzstan as well.
那怎么离开？这是一个大问题。
But the big question was, how are we going to leave Kyrgyzstan?
因为我们少数民族不能到第三个国家。
Because we're ethnic minorities, so we can't go to a third country.
中国第一，吉尔吉斯斯坦是第二，已经不行离开。
China was the first country, Kyrgyzstan was the second country, so we could not leave.
如果有离开的，他们可能有协议或者什么回事，他中间人就丢了。
For those that left, they either had some kind of agreement or they just disappeared.
后来我们就联系到作家18。
And later we were able to come in contact with Ethan, who is a writer.
他联系到这个美国政府的 Connor。
And Ethan got in touch with Connor from the US government.
也是 ChinaAid 的副牧师。
And as well as Pastor Fu from ChinaAid.
有了他们的帮助，我们成功的离开了吉尔吉斯斯坦到土耳其。
With all of their help, we were able to leave Kyrgyzstan and went to Turkey.
在土耳其等美国政府的允许。
And we were in Turkey waiting for the approval from the US government.
等到2022年的4月。
And in April of 2020,
就离开了土耳其到美国。
we left from Turkey and arrived in the United States.
所以我通过这次的机会，
So through this opportunity,
感谢帮助我的个人，
I would like to express my gratitude to individuals,
机构、
organizations,
美国政府，
the US government,
感谢他们。
for allowing me to be here.
到了美国本土，
After arriving in the US,
美国政府也很热烈的欢迎了我们，
we received a passionate welcome from the US government,
专门的人过来接我们。
and there were US officials that came and welcomed us.
感谢他们的安排。
I would like to express my gratitude to them as well.
谢谢你们的关注。
Thank you all for your concern.
What a testimony. I hope that each of us is able to carry those words and his story as we continue our work that we do. And we are honored to have a surprise guest, Congressman Chris Smith, who was actually crucial in securing the asylum and the arrival of Joseph and his family to the United States. He is the U.S. representative for New Jersey's 4th Congressional District, and he has served as the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission and the ranking member of the bipartisan Congressional Executive Commission on China. Congressman Chris Smith, if you would say a few words.
Thank you very much. And It is an honor to be here to join Joseph as he tells us exactly what went on in Xinjiang and the terrible persecutions that he has suffered. You know, that we need to do more of that chronicling so that the charges that could be brought against Xi Jinping and the others can be more effectively prosecuted. Today we had a hearing of the Tom Lantos Commission. I'm the co-chairman of it. And, you know, there's still that sense of, well, maybe we ought to just focus on crimes against humanity rather than genocide. Are you kidding me? Genocide is the worst of the crimes. Xi Jinping is directly responsible for it. And you are a truth teller that helps us to know what is going on. I want to thank Bob Fu. I mean, Bob Fu is just, he's a force to be reckoned with on the entire planet, especially all things related to China. I'll never forget when Frank Wolf and I traveled, as we did frequently, to the PRC, Beijing, and elsewhere, Shanghai. We'd call Bob even when we were in country and we know it was being listened to. One time, we said, you know, we're going to head down to Tiananmen Square and hold up a banner, remember, Scott, that says, you know, human rights matter. And the embassy got a call within 20 minutes saying that if we did that, we're in a secure embassy van, by the way, U.S. Embassy, we will be deported immediately to the airport. And so Bob's, you know, just an incredible champion of human rights, and I want to thank him. And of course, for those who are stuck in South Korea, Bob brought that case to us. We're working on it all the time, especially with the new government in South Korea, which I have higher hopes than the Moon government that they will be responsive. We just had another hearing on Korea, and I chaired it, and we focused again on these Christians who escaped the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party, expecting to get asylum or at least some refugee status, and are still in limbo. But I'm very confident that they will not be deported. But I want to thank you for, I mean, if they go back, we all know what happens to them. They will be either killed or tortured first and then some killed. And to see those wonderful children and their parents, of course, and family members, I mean, they are believers who we need to put sandbags around them, and we are trying. So, Bob, thank you again for bringing that to us as well. Bob's own story is legendary. You know, he's been maligned by the Chinese Communist Party personally, which I found to be outrageous. And so you know, that's what they do. You know, in country, it's a lot easier in China for them to do it. But now it's one of those things where they do it even here against him. So, and I'll just conclude with this. Next year, if we do take control of the House, I hope to be chairman of the China Commission, and we will do hearing after hearing, action plan after action plan, to try to make sure that we hold Xi Jinping, the war crimes criminal, the genocide criminal, to account. I wish that Biden would do more. We don't know what they talk about when they get on the phone, but you know, if anything, we've proven that all of this nice talk leads to more, not less, tyranny. I have introduced a bill that is patterned after the executive order that Bill Clinton did when we had the votes, we believe, to condition most favored nation status for China. This was back in 1993, 94. It was a bipartisan effort. I was one of the leaders. Frank Wolf was one of the other ones. And we said, have conditionality, and we'll see a different China over time, especially because they won't get the goodies of economic trade to that government, because it all goes to the government first and to their military, unless they show serious and sustained progress in the realms of human rights. Bill Clinton shamelessly ripped up his own executive order on May 26, 1994. I actually did a press conference. He did it on a Friday afternoon when everybody had left the House and Senate. I was kind of shocked that he waited to a time where the news cycle was just about over. I rushed over and did a press conference. It's still on C-SPAN, May 26, 1994, and said, we just gave away the store. China has looked us in the eyes, and they looked at Bill Clinton in the eyes and said, human rights really don't matter. It's all about money. And that's when we lost China, in my humble opinion, because everything was, we'll just trade more. You don't trade a dictatorship into into a democracy. It does not matriculate from what the Chinese Communist Party does each and every day into freedom-loving people just because they're making money. If anything, they get worse. So I've introduced a bill to take that idea of linking human rights with trade. It's a very, very uphill battle to get that bill passed, but I'm going to push till we get it. I did the same thing with Romania and MFN, smaller country, of course, under Nicholas Ceausescu in the 1990s, and 80s, I should say that was. And I was shocked how many people said, oh, they came to the Olympics in L.A. Ceausescu was different. He was a monster. His Securitate tortured people. The book that got me into fighting for religious freedom was Torture for Christ by Richard Wurmbrand. And when I read that book, I said, my God, we can't be complicit and we can't be indifferent. We have to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves in fighting these dictatorships. Maybe not so much on the gentle. So I want to thank Bob for his leadership. It is amazing. It's extraordinary and makes a difference. And Scott, thank you for what you do on the commission. It's just amazing. And Piero Tazzi, who's on the Lantos Commission as our general counsel, thank you for all that he does. God bless you.
In classic fashions of how these go, we are quickly running out of time, but I want to thank you, Congressman Smith, for coming by and for being a great friend of ChinaAid and for everyone seeking religious freedom in China. For our last section, I want to invite up two guests to ask some quick questions about really what Congressman Smith was saying. What do we do from here? What are the action items going forward that we can take in order to intervene on the abuses that are happening? So first up, I would like to invite Bob Fu, who is the founder and president of ChinaAid, and also Scott Flipse, who is a longtime friend of ChinaAid and a congressional staffer. So we don't want to cut that. So very quickly, I'm going to direct some questions at you, but first I will look to Scott and say, with this testimony, I'm wondering what has the U.S. done previously and leading up to this today in order to combat the technology used by President Xi Jinping in persecuting religious minorities?
Is this working?
Here you go.
Hey, everyone. That's a big question, and we have a small amount of time. First, I want to say that there's people in this room that are heroes as well, who have fought and are fighting and are shining a light on, sort of the abuses that are going on, whether it's in Xinjiang or the Uyghur region, which I think is a preferable way to talk about Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, but other sort of issues, including sort of human rights lawyers. My friend Teng Biao is here. As well, who's been tortured and, experienced incredible arbitrary detention for, simply trying to sort of hold the Chinese government up to its own rules, its own laws. On the technology front, I mean, this is an incredible, sort of advance in the technology of abuse, digital authoritarianism. As we call it, technological authoritarianism is an expansive, digitized surveillance system that chronicles every bit of life, right? And it's integrated, and it's seeming to integrate sort of biometric information that is collected, facial recognition, other sort of human technologies, all into sort of an integrated policing platform. Cameras are only one part of it. Hike Vision is only one of the sort of camera makers for facial recognition. It requires software. It requires computers. It requires AI. There's so many sort of different sort of companies that are integrated. Human Rights Watch, the Uyghur Human Rights Project, The Intercept, Adrian Zenz, other people are doing fantastic work, sort of looking at these issues. The response of the U.S. government has to be sort of at a 35,000-foot level, down to sort of personal protection of individuals, sort of digital hygiene or digital safety, has to be sort of, integration or sort of circumvention tools have to be pushed out. People need to know how to try to make themselves more safe online, even though that is very, very, very difficult in China. But there has to be sort of things that, let me say this, because there is not much time. I mean, the issue of privacy, I think the Chinese government has recognized is a gateway issue, right? It's a gateway issue that allows them to circumvent all rights, because if you know you aren't you have no privacy, if you know and are told by police officers that you have no privacy, that everything is monitored, if you know this, then you will not engage in your sort of universally recognized rights. You will self-censor. You will not worship if you're told that worship is something that they know you're going to do. So the privacy issue, I think, is one of those issues that we really have to think about in our diplomacy, in our political outreach, in multilateral institutions, in our diplomacy with China, but also with friends and allies, because the U.S. is going to be able to do this by themselves. And so 80 countries have now, I think we've seen, have taken up some sort of Chinese technology, some sort of Chinese surveillance technology, telecommunications. 80 countries, every proto-dictator, every autocrat, every sort of nascent dictator will want this technology for social control, and it's pushing its way out. But it's more than just challenges to sort of privacy and human rights and democratic governance. It's also sort of a long-term economic security issue as well, as the Chinese government wants to sort of turn e-commerce platforms from Europe and from the United States to China. So there's human rights issues, there's national security issues, there are economic security issues that go along with addressing the digital security or the digital surveillance and technological authoritarian issue. I've been proud of what our government has done the last couple of years, starting in the Trump administration and continuing in the Biden administration. We can always do more. We've tried to address and call genocide a genocide. We've tried to address issues in Hong Kong, as best we can. We've passed bills, and the heroes here are, sort of Marco Rubio and Chris Smith and, Jim McGovern and Senator Merkley, Jeff Merkley, and others in the Congress who, Speaker Pelosi, I don't think we would have passed all these bills if Nancy Pelosi wouldn't have been the Speaker beginning in 2018. We've done a lot in Congress, and there's lots more to be done. I'm trying to compress a lot of sort of things into one. I think I'm proud of what the U.S. government has done. There's always can be done more. This has to be a priority. The issue of surveillance, digital authoritarianism has to be, because the issue of social control can be pushed out by technology, and social control can be sort of engaged by any country that is using Chinese technology now for suppression of rights and sort of national security issues. So this has to be something that, and I can talk about it, to more about what actually can be done if you're interested.
Thank you for that. And Bob, I'm sorry to give you closing statements as, as the man who signs my paychecks. But yes, I want to direct it to you and talk about, if you can briefly talk about how this is impacting all religions in China, and it's being implemented, regardless of which God you worship, and also what we can do from an NGO standpoint going forward.
Thank you, Scott. We don't have time, unfortunately, to have Joseph's wife, Julie, to talk about her own experience when Joseph was in the concentration camp for 10 months, and she was, under as close the kind of the digital tyranny as her husband was. Basically, she not only kind of being surveillanced with their little boy at home, but also every month the government, security officer, government officials were assigned to impose themselves to live in their bedroom for 3 days a month. Can you believe, knock, knock, I'm your friend. Tonight I need to stay overnight, 3 nights. That's to her. For a wife with a little boy, every month, at least 3 nights. That's called 结对的 in Chinese language. And the Communist Party was not even ashamed. They said, they put a propaganda with a little boy, said, oh, I miss my uncle. That's called uncle. This is a kind of surveillance. Of course, the Communist Party, to the churches, Congressman Wolf just touched, Congressman Smith mentioned about this case. There's 60 members, 32 children, 28 adults. They thought they escaped out of China in Jeju Island, in a secure location, at least in a foreign soil. But just like a few weeks ago when we were doing a briefing online, one of the elders, this is in Jeju Island, in South Korean soil, they received the text message from one of their family members, because every one of their family members in China had been interrogated, arrested, and one of the family members with the security agent, basically there with his father in Guangzhou, said, turn on your WeChat with your family members in Jeju Island so that we can locate them. So if we don't act now, the Chinese government any day could send their agents, forcefully kidnap them back. So that's my last appeal and prayer request for these people.
All right, thank you. And that is the conclusion of our event. We thank you for attending, and we would love for each of you to come by the ChinaAid table, and we would love to get you involved in how to implement everything that we've talked about today. Thank you so much.